I recently bought this Sovol SV06 Ace Plus as an Amazon return, and after getting it functional, it still left some quality to be desired. Before I give this away for Christmas, I want to give it a good once over and make sure it'll be reliable. We're going to properly wash the bed, replace the nozzle, grease the rails, tighten the eccentric nuts on each rail to acceptable levels, and more to bring this printer back to factory spec. Before we get started, if you broke your printer like I did here, and you need to get 3D prints faster than you can get replacement parts and print time, then head over to PCBWay. The more prints you want, the cheaper it becomes. They offer more materials than I have ever played with. You can even choose different colors if that matters to you. Even cooler, you have options to support inserts, assembly, even silk screening. Use my link in the description below for $5 off your first order. Step 1 is always clean the build plate. A dirty print bed is likely the #1 reason prints aren't adhering and you're having a terrible first layer. It's super easy too. Here I'm using a tiny bit of dish soap, then off camera, rinsing it and drying. This is the default build plate, so I want to finish it off with some isopropyl alcohol, but if you have a cold plate, read your instructions because this may not be recommended for aftermarket plates. If you're here for first layer issues, I'd honestly recommend reprinting now and coming back if the issues continue. If your layers aren't perfectly stacked or your nozzle's bumping into your model, it may be that there's too much or too little tension on the guide rails and screws. The first thing we should do is make sure our rails and screws have some fresh lubrication. We'll start on the Z-axis screws, and with the extruder at the top of the Z-axis, we'll put a thin layer on each screw. It doesn't have to be perfect, because we're going to lower the extruder, which will spread it out evenly. Before lowering, it'll be easiest to apply the same lube to the X-axis metal rails the extruder moves side to side on. Again, the movement of the extruder will even this out for you. Then I recommend doing it again and raise the extruder to the top. Finally, do this again on the bed's Y-axis rails. Each side, move it back and forth to spread it out. If you have any wobble in your bed or the extruder, then you need to tighten the eccentric nuts on the rollers on the rails. If each piece seems oddly hard to move, maybe you need to loosen these nuts a little bit. Either way, only one side will have one, and you just take a small wrench, stick it between the roller and the object that's on the rail, and twist the nut that's inside there. The hole in the middle is actually offset a little bit, so by turning this nut, you are tightening or loosening the roller's grip on the rail. Don't over tighten, but don't let it wobble all over either. Just make sure it's nice and snug. Tensioning your belt is just as important because loose belts lead to layer shifts and failed prints. There isn't much guidance on what the correct belt tension is, and Sovol has no guidance for the SV06 or its variants. I'm using an app on my phone to measure 110 Hz on 150 millimeter of belt, as I recall advice like this from my Ender 3 V1 days, but you can also go based on feel. Err on the side of loose rather than tight. While a failed print would be unfortunate, you can tighten and retry. With a belt too tight, it may just snap on you. Then you'd have to source replacement parts before adjusting and trying again. The belt on the bed's Y-axis is adjusted with the blue knob on the front. The extruder's X-axis belt is adjusted with the black knob next to the camera on the right, as if you're looking at it from the front. This chapter should be replacing the nozzle in the script, but the nozzle was screwed into the heater block, which can freely rotate, and this little pop is me twisting too much and ripping off the connection on the extruder's PCB. In an attempt to not have to order a replacement, I tried soldering it back on, which was a success, but I also broke the plastic connection so it doesn't stay seated. Okay, one new PCB a week later from California, and I thought I'd include this small section for anyone else confused on where all these wires go. There really isn't much to say other than push the wires back in a way that go through the holes available in the cover and push the cover on, which is held in magnetically. And hopefully, as we'll cover in the next chapter, we'll do it right the second time. Let's try again. I remove the fan by removing a screw on each side, then this time use 2 wrenches instead of 1. One wrench to hold the heater block in one place and another to unscrew the nozzle tip. Using both wrenches again to screw in the new nozzle. If we have a clog, you can remove the nozzle and warm it up in the oven so you could quickly clean it without having to keep it in the heater block. If you're going to replace any electronics, you'll want to know where the motherboard is and the routes the wire takes. First step is to always disconnect the power and be careful as capacitors can hold a charge longer than you think within that power supply and therefore everywhere else. To access the motherboard, there's a bolt with the Allen key head that releases the clamshell. The manual has all the connections labeled, which I'll put on the screen. Finally, I'll try to show where all the wires run without making you dizzy. Hopefully, your Sovol SV06 is printing better than ever. Like, subscribe. The Sovol wiki doesn't have much information for this SV06 Ace, so I hope this helped.